Hey everyone, it's Steve Richard. Welcome to another episode of Call Camp. I'm joined by Seth Kinney, VP of Operations at Qualified Meetings in Tampa, Florida. Funny story, I known this guy, Matt Wheeler. I was selling to him a long time ago, lived in the Baltimore area, and he always had a life dream of starting an outsourcing business. And he and I spoke on this in depth. I just sort of shared some of my experiences, and lo and behold, he went off and did it. And now they have 100 people on the phone between Maryland, Tampa, and I think they've got a Latin America office too. So really, really cool. Seth is going to do this lesson today on call scripts versus frameworks. And for those of us who are in roles where we sell on the phone, we live and die by the phone, really, this is an ongoing topic of interest and dare I say debate that we have in the industry. What should you do? Should you prepare people and then give them nothing, so let them wing it, if you will? Should we provide them with some kind of a template that they should use? Or should we give them an actual proper script? And before I let you answer that question, I'll tell you that I did a call camp like this with a guy named Mike Brooks. His nickname is MrInsideSales.com. I think he's a self-given nickname. And he feels very, very, very adamantly in his case that we should be giving scripts. He said in Hollywood with actors, do they wing it? No, they do scripts. They have some kind of an idea ahead of time, but I think, Seth, you picked that word frameworks for a very, very specific reason. So talk to us a little bit about why this topic, which by the way, I love, I think you did a great job with it. Why this topic, walk us through your thinking.
Yeah, Steve, first, great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. And I think the topic really came from me seeing these debates happening over LinkedIn. Should we do a script? Should we do a framework? How do you define the two? And I think that's really where the conversation has to start. I have a hunch that a lot of people are already using a framework, but they're calling it a script. So when you're looking at a script, my definition of a script is a very rigid talk track that just lays it out word for word, what a rep is supposed to say, where they're supposed to say it, how they're going to take a prospect down a very specific path. Where the challenge comes in is, what do you do when the prospect doesn't conform to that script and requires more conversation? How do you go off the rails? How do you do that intelligently? And how do you keep it within a framework? Which is where we came up with that topic. So that's something I've worked with heavily, spent a lot of time in heavily compliant and regulated fields with insurance and various other industries. So there are purposes and uses for scripts, but I think by and large, a framework can replace a script, but a script can't replace a framework, long story short.
I like that idea. So a script can't replace a framework, but a framework can replace a script. That's interesting. It's an interesting point. So are we at the poll here? What do we, because I want to hear what, there we go. I knew it. I want to hear what you think. If you're out there listening to this, what do you use? Are you using some kind of a framework or talking points? Are you using a script? I don't know. Or are you using nothing at all? So what does your organization use? Go ahead and fill out that poll. And actually, after you fill out that poll too, if you have any additional thoughts on this, I know this is a very, very galvanizing topic. Please put them in the chat or tweet us, #CallCamp. I'd love to hear from you, and we will be looking at those and having more of a conversation throughout this webinar. So which one of these things do you? And now, Seth, you said you've been places before that they use scripts. Have you ever been at any places before where there's literally nothing, like they don't have any frameworks or talking points or anything?
I can't say that I've been in an environment where there was nothing. Usually there's at least bullet points or some sort of a framework, for lack of a better term. But I can't say that I've been in an environment where there was just nothing at all. So I'd be interested to see anybody in the audience who's dealing with that today.
Well, they're out there because 64% of you said frameworks, 21% said scripts, and 2% don't know, and then 13%, so 1 in 8 out there are saying we're not using anything. Maybe they give us some training, but we don't have any documented bullet points, talking points, anything like that along the way. So I think this is a fine line between, obviously, the cons are you sound like a robot, and the pros are you can fill in the blanks along the way if you have a framework. So it seems like that's why there's more popularity around frameworks. So talk to us about the benefits of those.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Seth, go ahead and give us the benefits of those scripts.
Yeah, so scripts, in my experience, they can really help ramp up new hires. That's one of the big draws of a script. If you're hiring very entry-level folks and you're trying to scale them up quickly, scripts can really help shorten that training time. They really give a recipe for success. This is what we've seen work before, and you take a prospect through a very specific journey through that conversation to get to the end point or the desired goal. It's very easy to measure compliance. It makes QA and call scoring very easy because you can just measure to that script and say how well did they follow that script. Consistency from rep to rep is also there. You don't find a lot of variance there because they're all reading from the same playbook, so they're all saying the same things. So it does have its advantages. It can also be useful in scenarios where there's a fixed event. Let's say that the entire lead list is getting the exact same message, and it's not going to go off the rails too far in any direction. They can be very useful there as well.
And it also begs the question on some point, this is more of a hypothetical conversation, but if it is truly that scripted and there's like a flow chart, could AI replace it? Let's not have that discussion now, but it is an interesting point of consideration. So we know about the benefits of the script. What are the downsides?
So downsides, as you're seeing them on screen here, robotic. That's the very first one that comes to mind. And I'll use an example of a mass email versus a targeted email. If you received a mass email that thousands of other people received so that it applies to everyone, how does that feel versus a very tailored email that's specific to just you? And I think it's the same thing when we're looking at scripts versus frameworks. It requires you to say the same thing over and over again, which you're going to see drops in tone, pace, and inflection. Of course, you're going to have your good reps, your bad reps, and then everyone else is in between. But for most people, it gets very boring reading the same script over and over again, and then you lose that sort of room for personal flair. You end up just reading off of a sheet. Again, tone, pace, and inflection suffer a bit. And not all reps can really do that. They can't really stay just reading down a list day in and day out, 50 to 100 times a day. It gets to be very challenging, and you quickly lose interest there. I think the other piece is, even if you are scripting, most of your seasoned and tenure reps over time are going to end up moving away from that anyway and creating their own script internally that they're using when they get into these conversations to articulate the value better, or to transition from one phase of a call to another better, or whatever the case may be. So I think even if you're starting with a script, over time, your tenured reps are likely not following that to a T either.
And I'll tell you what, Seth, I just got some research today from this company is called Backlinko, but they got some pretty interesting research, having analyzed 13 million emails. Personalized subject lines increased response rate by 30.5%. Personalized email bodies increased the response rate by 32.7%. So we know personalization tends to be better. And with frameworks, we have the ability to personalize more. So go ahead. What are the benefits?
Yeah, so I think, again, it just gives that rep more freedom. It gives them the ability to have a real conversation instead of trying to read from a piece of paper and then, the prospect says one thing and then I got to flip to the right, piece of paper in the playbook to read that particular line or script. It's a bit more adaptable to the modern buying process, where folks are going to have some intelligence about your company or product in a lot of cases. You have to be able to just hold that conversation as opposed to reading just directly from a script. It really focuses on the skills over compliance. So the rep being able to not only know their product, but also know the industry, know a little bit about their target persona that they're speaking with, know a little bit about the environment for that particular company if they're doing an account-based approach. It just gives, really in a nutshell, a lot more freedom to the rep to be creative, and it eliminates boredom. I know that's not on this list, but it really does eliminate boredom. You can really get into a conversational mindset as opposed to, hey, let me go jump on the phones and read the same sheet of paper 100 times. It's more like, let me go jump on the phones and have some conversations.
Amen to that. All right, what are the downsides?
Downsides, success is a little bit less predictable because, again, you're not starting with a proven script, or at least what you think is a proven script. So it can be a little less predictable. Some reps are going to struggle with what to say as they're getting through the different phases of that framework. They may struggle to really tie together specific use cases or specific industry areas of interest for a potential prospect with what their industry or their persona cares about. So that may be a challenge for some, at least in the early days. And really brand new reps won't know what to say. They can end up sounding scripted anyways, because what's going to happen is they'll pull out whatever that white paper use case asset is that the prospect downloaded that has them calling.
Everyone, I think we might have just lost Seth. I don't know what happened. Hopefully there wasn't a lightning strike there in Tampa. If you can hear me, do a favor and raise your hand. So if you're hearing me right now.
Experienced reps more so than brand new. I think if you're a rep and then modify it over time to become more of a framework.
All right. Hey, Seth, you don't know this, but somehow there was some kind of a blip in your audio that we all experienced, but we're hearing you fine now. So maybe there was a lightning strike in Tampa. All right. So let's move on here. You know,
sorry guys, I'll try not to hold any coat hangers in the air.
Yeah, exactly. I think what we're all coming down to is it depends. But before that, there was a really, really great, like pretty hilarious and probably very true comments. Sam, you want to take that?
Yeah, so Kelly chimed in with, I don't know how anybody could be successful with a script. No one wants to talk to somebody using a script. I know when I get cold calls from reps out there and I can tell that they're a little scripted or that they say the same thing every time they're calling a marketer, I just immediately hang up.
It's a you know, we've created this paradigm, kind of telemarketer paradigm in the world, and now we're trying to break it. And if you're calling someone inbound, like I'll give you an example. I called Vanguard to manage some of inherited IRA accounts, and they're extremely scripted because it's a very compliant industry, and I feel comfortable with that in that case because I'm calling them. I think there's something to be said with scripts for inbound calls compared with scripts with outbound calls as well. And it'll be interesting to see as we analyze more and more calls what the results yield. Any other thoughts there, Seth?
Yeah, I think that's spot on the money. I think, you're going to have certain cases where a script makes sense. But to my very first point, a framework can replace a script, but a script can't replace a framework. So, if you've got a scenario where it's heavily compliant, heavily regulated, or it's, again, as I was mentioning, it's a specific fixed event or a specific asset that a lead list downloaded, and that they've got access to that. Anything that just makes a big list very specific and that they've all received or seen the same thing, you can get a little bit more scripted than you would typically.
And that's the tightrope walk that we walk. It's being scripted without, being consistent without being scripted, having continuity at the same time, making it so it's personalized and human. Here's my take on this. I don't have any real research or data or science behind this as I like to, but here's what I've seen. If you give a human being a paragraph, they read it like a script. If you give a human being bullet points, and I call them sets of bullet points. Generally speaking, any set of bullet points will have like 3 bullet points that sort of all work together. And obviously this is just a placeholder. Mary had a little lamb, white fleece like snow, sheep followed, right? Jack was broke, climbed a beanstalk, stole the giant's golden egg, hacked down the beanstalk. So it's like little simple things that we use to remember. And of course, we have all of our little frameworks that we've talked about in previous call camps too, like, BANT, ANIM, T-MAN, MEDIC, fill in the blank, all these acronyms that we can use to remember the stuff that we're supposed to be talking about without having a hard and fast script. That's my point of view. Never make them be more than 1 page. What I've seen is that battle cards work the best relative to like a big, heavy binder that someone pulls off the shelf. And also, of course, surprise, surprise, real examples are better. So if you can pull out 1 page that has 3 sets of bullet points, and then if you can play a bunch of calls that leverage those 3 sets of bullet points to have a conversation and create a discussion, then you're probably going to have much more success with consistency and at the same time maintain a level of independence with the rep. All right. Any final thoughts there, Seth? Otherwise, I think we're diving into calls, right?
No, I think that's spot on the money. I mean, again, battle cards are key. You want to try to get to a point where you've got talking points for each of your personas, each of your industries. Try to get as granular as possible. And that really is the foundation of a good call framework.
That's a really good point. So everyone, takeaway here is I love 4 boxes. You know, it's my consultant by nature, X-axis, Y-axis, and do it like that. If you put on one axis the persona and the other axis the industry vertical, and then fill in each of those boxes with 3 bullet points, you've got a really, really good recipe for success, something that a rep can follow, that's repeatable and also personalized. So everyone, just type in the chat here, what's your personal call style? If you have any insight here that you'd like to share, we want to see it, and we will go ahead and get to that. Any things coming in here, Sam?
So we've got, in relation to what Steve was just speaking on, using bullet points gives a lot of continuity in calls, so that's an excellent point. And I know one of our reps, his little touch of flair was really studying his industry he was calling in for, and he figured out that they refer to refrigerated trucks as reefer trucks, and he dropped that like nothing, and it worked so well.
That's another.
That crosses industry, Sam. I think that crosses industry.
It does. As you know, a great source for your bullet points, for your talking points, for your frameworks is the conversations you have with your prospects. So it becomes a closed loop circle where you can reference and say, last week when I was talking to Seth Kinney, he mentioned that he really loves the ability to have frameworks. How are you guys trying to currently leverage frameworks? Now you're speaking the language of that persona for that industry vertical, and then bam, you're having a relevant conversation, you're creating value. Most importantly, you're earning the right to ask questions. You're earning the right to ask questions. So tweet us, #CallCamp. Let's listen to real calls, speaking of earning the right to ask questions. So Seth, while Sam is transitioning over here to these calls, do you want to tee up what we're hearing, what we're going to be listening to?
Briefly, sorry, I guess are we just going right into it? Okay. So we've got 2 calls. Really both are embracing a framework approach. Just a quick rundown of how we do this internally. We break a call into sections. We're looking at the introduction, value delivery, active listening and responding. Where did you ask for the business or the meeting? And then when do you stop? When do you say, okay, enough's enough? Let me not talk myself out of the meeting here. Let's pause and then wait for that prospect to respond. So that's the framework that we use. There are certainly scripted elements to that, like the intro, the value delivery. Those should stay relatively consistent.
Everyone, Seth's on such a roll.
Because you do want to really hyper-focus on certain areas and change over time. So in this call example, yeah, exactly. And in this particular example, we're looking at a prospect who has already had a very specific software in their environment, and we know that it fits what we're doing internally for our client. So Sam, go ahead and let's roll the tape.
And I'm just going to jump forward a little bit. We don't need to listen to the phone ringing. We all know what that sounds like.
Hello.
Hey, good morning. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. Hey, I know you weren't expecting the call, so thanks for taking the time. I was just following back up with you. Maybe you got my voicemail last week to congratulate you on getting going with your new strategy. Any chance you got that?
Yeah, I didn't. No, I didn't get that one.
Okay, well, no problem. The reason I'm following up is, we wanted to let you guys know that you had an opportunity to work. Yeah, I don't know if they let you know that when you got started with the new strategy, but we're able to help boost retention and recruitment efforts by utilizing AI to find the best candidate for a job based on their skill set, so there's no bias or anything like that. And then we see a huge increase in application rates because candidates who go on our career website and click on the button and upload their resume are actually 3 times more likely to apply when they fix the job. I don't know if it's human nature or what, but when
all right, so we got in through the intro about a minute into the call. Actually, Sam, hover over that comment here that Seth's got. So Seth, talk us through. We're in the beginning of the call. I hear, in terms of the behavior from the rep, I hear your rep referencing the voicemail, leading with some value. Talk us through your framework and how he's leveraging that in the beginning.
Sure. So we did the dynamic intro piece. We got the prospect on the phone. I think tone was still a little bit low here. We could have boosted it. I don't think it detracted away from the rest of the conversation. As we move into the value delivery piece, which is where we're at right in this particular piece of the conversation, we're looking at, how well did he explain the solution and how it attached to the existing software in the prospect's environment. Did we reference anything in particular that would really show value for them, which I think we did a good job here. A couple of things I would stay away from is stay away from referencing failed attempts. Don't say, hey, I sent you a few emails that you never replied to, right? Because there's obviously a reason why they didn't reply. It's okay to use that as a transition statement, which is what was done here. So overall, I think good score on this particular section. And he's got the prospect thinking about, okay, there's something that I don't know already that comes along with this package that we've already signed up for and could potentially increase our ROI in this investment.
The context is established. You've heard us talk about that on Call Camp before, the context. The other thing that's worth noting here is you're hearing some blipping. That blipping is Qualified Meetings sanitize this call. So there's a couple of points where it's just like a little, like you don't hear anything. So just realize that's what's going on there. There was something being said, but they sanitized the call for the purposes of being able to play it in a big public webinar like this. All right, let's keep on going.
He picks the job for him. You see a huge increase in applications. Also, it lets them a little aware of jobs maybe they weren't good candidates for, or that they are good candidates for, but they weren't aware of it because of their skill set. So then they see that and kind of spot a couple extra jobs that they can apply for. So we were calling to see if you guys might be interested in a demo of that and how it can drastically affect your recruitment efforts.
Not right now, but I do want to understand it a little bit more. So what is it that you're actually?
Okay, so I'm gonna give a comment here, and then Seth, let's go to yours. Actually, go to my comment, Sam. Before with the ear that I've trained over years of having done this with so many different companies, whenever I hear "not right now" and I'm interested, tell me more. We know that this is in terms of how you taxonomize any marketplace. We know that roughly 40% of the marketplace is not actively buying, but they're interested in potentially looking. They're susceptible or poised to begin an active buying cycle. That research comes from Chet Holmes International. So when we hear that, not right now, and I'm interested, it sounds like it's a paradox, right? Like, no, not now, and at the same time I'm interested. But really what that means is you got someone who's susceptible, and the topic is hitting home, but at the same time there is not an active buying cycle. And when we hear this, usually the language is I. So it's an individual who becomes susceptible, but then a consensus buying group is the group that goes into an active buying cycle. That's a we, and that's only usually about 3% of your marketplace at any given time is in an active buying cycle. So if he said, yes, that's actually something that we're interested in, and we have been looking at options, that would indicate an active buying cycle. But here he said, not right now, but I'm interested in, is telling us he's in the 40%. So anyway, Seth, quick side point there, but I wanted to get that out. Go ahead and let's go to your comment here and break us down as to where we are and what does he do from here.
Sure. And you're spot on the money there too, Steve. When we see that, we know that there's obviously interest. We got to really dig in there, make sure that we're putting our listening ears on to what comes next, because that's really how we're going to push to get this scheduled and really show this prospect the value that we're going to be able to bring to the table. So Sam, if you could hover over that comment just briefly. So really what we're getting here, and this is again sort of that high level view of what a script is different, how a script is different from a framework. The prospect's trying to clarify the product fit and value. He's asking for a more in-depth explanation. So if you're using a script here and you get this sort of curveball thrown at you, what do you turn to? What page do you turn to in your playbook and you go, okay, let me re-explain this again a different way and still read the script verbatim? It becomes challenging. So you have to go off script and you have to really think of how you can articulate that differently and still tell the same story. And that's what you'll see. That's what you'll see done here as we move into the green section. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more. I guess you say that is this software is this part of? Tell me what the integration, where does this actually come from?
It's a complete add-on to your current strategy. So I don't know if you're aware, but one of the biggest sellers of And so we have a direct integration with them. And just by adding on the candidate assist, there's a couple other suites that go with that, like our career coach, and so there's a few other items that you can add on to it too. Talent acquisition. It's really kind of pick and go what you really need, but kind of taking you to your career website and then going to ours, you click on the candidate assist button, and it's just another way of helping candidates find the right job within your organization. And we've seen a huge increase with millennials, right? So when they go on our website and they chat with, it has them rate our.
Seth, I'm going to pause here because you've got a pretty good comment right in this section.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this ties into really Steve's bullet points earlier. This is really battle card bullet points that are being used in this particular statement. We're really looking at building credibility. This is 10 years of work, which you're going to hear in just a moment. Potential ROI, what it saved us. Potential net promoter score improvements. And then really using that feel, felt, found in a storytelling fashion. Here's what we feel. We know you feel the same way. Here's what we found. And then here's what the ultimate ROI was. So you'll see that sort of play itself out as we get through the rest of this green section here, but really ties right into the battle card example and what we use with building all of our call frameworks.
A site of an NPS score of 67 because when they get engaged, you just see huge levels of boostment, especially when you upload the resume. So what goes in refactors the entire website and finds every single job that we have to offer, and then looks at those skill sets that the candidate has provided. And this is using 30 years of data that we've gathered, right? And this is 10-year-old technology, so it's nothing new. It's stuff that we've been using for a while. But we did the same thing as you guys. We just started working with about a little over a year and a half ago and implemented AI. And within the first year alone, we saved over $100 million. So we've been able to greatly boost our efforts in the HR process. So now we're just kind of reaching out to you guys, sharing the story, and seeing if you'd be open to further discussion, kind of giving you a quick.
Hey, Seth, Steve, I'm going to jump in this one because that to me is a perfect example of a section, knowing how you use frameworks, that I say, mission accomplished on the framework, because it sounds very organic. It sounds like he just came up with that on the spot right there. But at the same time, my trained ear knows that there's probably some frameworks and some bullet points behind the scene that he's leaning on as he's saying that. So any comments there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We want it to sound natural. We want it to sound conversational and not scripted on purpose, because people know when they're getting read a script, just like they know when they're reading a mass email, just like they know when you're being generic and vanilla in your approach. So we want to stay away from that. We want it to feel conversational and dynamic in nature. And I think that was a great job overall in taking that customer through that very specific story. The only thing I would add to this as a potential point of improvement is to shorten that up a little bit, just make it a little bit more concise, get rid of some of the ums and ands and kindas, but overall it didn't detract from the call, and he did a great job re-explaining the value from the first point, which again, you're going to see happen one more time as we get through this next section from the prospect.
Demo of what that actually looks like. And then kind of going from there. Yeah.
And so this would help us, and we don't hire many entry-level folks. Sure. So if I'm interested in something, it's really about engineering folks, senior-level engineers.
Absolutely.
Can you pause right there, Sam?
Would tack onto our.
Perfect. So we just heard the prospect say, hey, I'm not targeting millennials, which was in the previous talk track. Really, we're looking at senior level engineers. That's really where we're going to see the value from this. All right, go ahead.
Website, and candidates would interact directly on our website.
Correct.
This is not going out and finding candidates. This may be finding candidates within our database,
Correct.
Hey, I know you have a next point here, Seth. I'm going to sneak in one comment if you want to go to my comment. The one comment to sneak in here is, from my experience, when you look at the prospect engaging like this, like the prospect just engaged, this is a good opportunity to reverse. So answer the question with a question. It's a Sandler term, reversing. You're probably familiar with it.
Sure.
this would have been a nice opportunity because you can start to see it's turning into a little bit of a wall of sound, a little bit of a one-sided. At the same time, the prospect's listening, so it's not detrimental and does get the meeting. This would be a good opportunity to flip it around and say, okay, what have you been trying to do? Because right now it seems like you have pretty high abandonment of your different jobs pages. What are you trying to do to improve people actually applying to those jobs? What's worked? What's not worked? What's pain been around that? How have you tried to address that issue? So I'd like to get more engagement here before he re-explains for the third time. That's my view, but that's, again, more of a personal opinion on this. Do you have anything to add here? Otherwise, we'll keep listening.
No, I think that's exactly what you'll see referenced later. I didn't quite go into the same depth in the call scoring piece, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, because what comes next now? So now we've got 3 different asks to really clarify the value, clarify what it is that the solution can do for them. At this point, we have to be hyper tailored, and what comes next out of the reps, talk track needs to really be very tailored in nature. We missed the mark a little bit, which you're going to see referenced here, but I think overall we kept it on track, and it ended up turning positive, which we'll see in just a moment. So go ahead, Sam. Go ahead and play that.
Right. It is on another part I heard you say.
Yeah, so this is, let's say a candidate goes onto your career website and is interested in looking at a job, right? And they go to your career website, and there's very limited as far as just capabilities of what they can do. So for instance, when you're working with, you can ask them interactive questions, right? We can ask what the company culture is like or what the hiring process is like. So it really gets the candidate more involved with the hiring process, because it kind of leads them down a rabbit hole of just discovering all this information. So we see a huge increase of applicants who stay on our website being more engaged with. And as I said earlier, so when you upload the candidate's resume, which they can easily do, it only takes a matter of seconds, refactors the whole website, looks at every job that you guys have available and provides that list to the candidate. And then ranks, from highest ranking all the way to the lowest ranking. So it makes them aware of opportunities that they didn't even know existed. Or, for instance, I go on and I upload my resume and I see multiple jobs that I didn't know I was a good candidate for, and I'm looking at them and I go, well, I came here for this position, but now that I see that, that's kind of a route maybe I didn't consider going before. But because my skill set's making me a good candidate, I'm more likely to apply. So we see huge boosts in that. And also with our career coach, you're using more.
Worth noting, that's what we call a verbal nod. So when you say something that demonstrates that you understand an issue, a challenge, something that the prospect wants to accomplish or avoid or anything like that, and then you get that like you just heard right there, that verbal nod, that's a really, really good thing. That means that they're tracking, they're paying attention, they're not quote unquote multitasking, which basically means they're ignoring you for checking their email.
Right, exactly. And you're on the right track. I think that's exactly what it is. And then in just a second here, Sam, play this just a little bit further.
Data with where he can essentially build out a roadmap for that candidate and say, hey, based on those skill sets and based on your past experience and based on the position that you're looking for, this is what, essentially would be a good route. And this is what your peers have done, that are ahead of you.
There we go. All right, hit pause there. Okay, so what we found here was a little earlier, he goes back to the millennial speak when he's talking about really re-explaining the value. He kind of saves it right here where he's kind of switching gears and going back to, here's what your peers have done, potentially senior level engineers, right, from the prospect's last comment. Here's where they should track in their career progression. And here's some opportunities that might make sense for you to explore as you go a little deeper. Now, me personally, to Steve's point, I would have dug a little bit deeper when that prospect said, hey, this is what I'm targeting. Find out why. Why are they targeting that? Why is that a pain point for them? And then use that in this last value delivery piece before you're asking for the business. But go ahead, Sam.
We can kind of show them, this is how you want to progress with the career. So it really just gets them much more engaged with the whole hiring process, gets them a little bit more excited, especially millennials. AI is a huge topic right now. So when they get on that website and they see that you're using artificial intelligence, that's just a big boost in how they view the whole company.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not something I'd want to do now, but it is something I'd be interested in learning about. And really, because it sounds kind of cool, and the brand is kind of what I'm thinking, right? I'd like to know what you guys are doing. Not something I would
just a quick
be doing in 2018.
Discovery demo
Yeah.
call. Yeah,
Yep.
no, this would be for obviously 2018.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Okay, so right here. All right, so right here we've confirmed sort of at least a basic timeline. We know that it's not going to be right now, but it's still interesting. I would have still liked to see us go a little deeper here. So what makes you feel like that's cool? What is it that that really piques your interest here? Just get more granular so that we can really show some value there for the prospect as we're closing this out and recapping. We missed a bit of an opportunity there, but again, I don't think it detracted away from the overall call.
Very good. All right, with that, you want to move on to the next call?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
So again, just a little bit of pre-call intelligence, similar situation. So for this, we started off where we always start off, right? Which is we've got a big list of data for marketing. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. We think we know what they downloaded, but we don't really know until we get them on the phone. We think we have an idea of where we want to lead in, but we don't really know. Again, this is a challenge that scripts have when you're trying to marry a script to a specific data set where frameworks can really shine. But go ahead, Sam, hit play.
How you doing today?
All right.
I was just calling to follow up with you. I know that we had sent you some information regarding the. I'm just calling to follow up with you and see if you had an opportunity to review it.
No, I haven't looked at it because my interest is at a high level because it's by our IT. I will simply use it, and I basically support my team in a technical architect's capacity. So it's not so far we haven't heard in terms of any failure issues.
Okay. So you're currently still using, correct, the VPN?
We do use a VPN with the, yeah.
Okay. Has anybody talked to you in reference to the some of the packaging bundling options that are available to you as a customer?
Nope, I'm not. Yes.
All right, hit pause right there.
No, I haven't talked to anybody.
Okay.
Now, one of the things I'm
okay. So at this point,
different.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say is there are a lot more questions to engage. So can you? I mean, I'm just curious as to how your framework is designed to play out with your different segments of the call or sections of the call, and how following the framework led from a pretty different conversation than the last one, which is almost all value driven and explanation driven, value proposition driven, I should say. And then this call is really, up until this point, it's been almost all asking questions driven, not leveraging and communicating a value prop by asking questions. So how did you get to this point, Seth, that with the same framework?
Yeah, so I think it's a slightly different framework. Where the lead came from was essentially we're looking at a single piece of the portfolio that's already being used by this client. We didn't know that until we opened that call up and we found that out from the prospect, in which the rep here switches gears and then starts talking about bundling and packaging, which is exactly what you should do with this particular client. Again, just for the collective audience, we're not single-threaded. We're not just one solution. We actually help our clients across a very vast variety of SaaS and IT service solutions. So they are slightly different from one to the next, as I'm sure you can imagine. But what you see Alex do here is really start going down a talk track of questions to uncover where there could potentially be a fit, which is, again, expertly done here by my standards. And he followed the framework to a T. Ideally, he's going to want to go through intro, value delivery, active listening and responding, and then asking for the meeting. So those are really the 4 key areas that we're looking at in the early stages of the call prior to the meeting being scheduled. He does a great job of active listening and responding here, where the prospect says, hey, we're using this. And then Alex really quickly switches gears and says, well, did you know about this? And it's trying to get that on his radar.
Well, they do have an essentials package, advanced and enterprise. Do you currently have?
I have no idea. All I know that when it comes up, when we start this one, our IT manages it, and when people have issues, I try to basically arbitrage with the our IT guys.
Okay.
Yeah, no idea.
So you're kind of in between. You're in between with. Okay, I see what you're saying. All right,
so it shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately, that's how it is.
Decision making. Is that something that you handle, or?
Yeah, all that stuff I do that one, and sometimes it becomes difficult, and many times basically gets unnecessary blame in this because I don't have the visibility. So I would love to know more about your product so I can give right information to my IT guys and ask them, tell them, hey, no, this is not what you're telling me is not correct, or that's not the limitation on the, or this is not the case, or if you don't have the failover ability, then you might want to look into this and help us improve, make it better.
All right, hit pause there, Sam. So now we've uncovered a really latent pain, which is a broken process, frustrations, but we didn't really dig deep into what those frustrations are. I would have liked to have seen that because that's the type of intel that you can use in a recap towards the end of the call, which is a bit of a different piece of the framework. Generally, that's going to happen, as you're scheduling a meeting, you'll recap and really drive the value home before you send out the calendar invite. But I think, again, didn't detract from the call. Just would have liked to have seen a few more layered questions here to go a little bit deeper to really come up with a really well thought out recap as we close this one out.
Totally understand. Now, let me take a look here. With next week being Thanksgiving, I do have an opportunity on Tuesday. Instead, not Tuesday the 20th, then it would be Tuesday the 27th or Thursday the 29th.
I think I'm going to be out. I'll be out for the rest of the week, actually, rest of the November. And I still have 3 more weeks of vacation to take in December. So we can try setting up somewhere in December if you have an opportunity.
I would have the. When are you getting back from vacation in November? When do you return?
I'm going to return after the Thanksgiving, so I want to wait until I think 2 days after the thing. Yeah, 4th of December. That sounds much better. Let's look at it. Hold on. Open my calendar here.
Go ahead and hit pause there, Sam.
December.
So excellent job here by the rep, just putting a stake in the ground and saying, how about the 4th, right? You've got the prospect that's sort of waffling back and forth. They don't have their calendar in front of them, which you're going to see is very evident as we get a little further down this call. But really just putting a stake in the ground. How about this date? We started with a win-win close. How about this date or this date? And then we moved into a bit of a waffle from the prospect. And then it's, okay, how about this date? And really putting a stake in the ground. This forces the prospect to pull the calendar up and really look and see what their availability looks like. So excellent job there. Go ahead.
4th. Okay, actually, that is something I've already planned up there. How about what's your availability on the 6th?
1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and actually also, 1 p.m. is fine. Actually, now looking at it, Wednesday, I'm also available. Wednesday, that's something else that I don't need to attend. Okay, let me take it out. So
1 p.m. Eastern, we need roughly about 30 minutes to an hour. I'll go ahead and send out the invite now. Is there anybody else that you want me to put on the invite, or is this something that's just you'll be able to handle?
I can basically forward it to the folks, or I can start the initial conversation and then for the people.
Like I said, what they're going to do is go ahead and review with you the suite, the packaging that is available to you, since you already have it, and they'll be able to answer anything.
All right, hit pause right there. There we go. So this would have been the best spot to speak to that uncovered latent pain that was mentioned by the prospect earlier. If we would have gone a little bit deeper there and uncovered really the frustrations, this is where we would have brought it back up in a recap. So overall, 3 out of 4 there. I think it was solid. But if we would have grabbed that earlier intel, we would have really hit the nail much harder on this recap here.
And Seth, this is Steve. I'll jump on that one. One of the things that we've talked about on previous call camps is the notion of button-up questions. Once you secured the appointment, then you can ask additional questions. And there are really 3 flavors. And he does one of them here really well. Is there anyone else to put on the invite? But then the rep starts answering his own question instead of just letting it hang. So if you're going to ask a question, is there include, just let it hang. He said, I'm going to forward it to other people. It's better for us to get the names rather than relying on him to forward it, which he may or may not do. And then, like you said a minute ago, the second flavor is to understand more about the challenge, the issue, the need, the pain, the frustration, which he didn't do in this case. We'd love to hear that happen. And then number three, the third bucket is contact information. Can I grab your cell phone number in case we have trouble connecting day of? Given the quality of conversation we've had up to this point, very high likelihood that your rep would get to his cell phone, the prospect's cell phone number here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The detail than I would, so that way you get all that information and you can make a decision based on that.
So one thing is basically the way Air Liquide operates, we have independent business units and we do have a lot of leeway. So in terms of basically we can use and the reason I'm sharing this one is that if you have an option like that, let's say if we want to create a local instance of that meets the Air Liquide policies and all that thing, all we do is we manage the uptime and make sure that the connection to the internet or how the people get in there is provided, and so that that way we can bring in some of the basically local control in terms of availability, or if there is any issues that we can manage that.
Exactly. Say something like that, and you're talking about visibility and wanting to know what's going on your network at any time. That's definitely, you want to talk about the network access control, and that's something that they'll be able to cover with you and let.
Or I would like to create a slave instance that works under IT, but we manage the slave instance and we manage the bringing in the internet connectivity to that device. So
it sounds like you would benefit a lot from customization as well.
Yep.
Being able to customize it to your needs, tailor fit it to your needs.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the
Go ahead and hit pause there, Sam. All right, excellent job there by Alex going through and just confirming needs and really having the prospect talk a little bit. Now, he got lucky here because they just sort of started talking, but he did show really high levels of active listening and response by tailoring that next statement to what the prospect was saying earlier and then confirming it. So what it sounds like is, and then saying what it sounded like, which obviously gave that verbal nod that Steve was mentioning earlier, which is an all green light, good to go, meeting scheduled situation. So if we want to go ahead and hit play, we'll close this call out, and it should be done here in just a moment.
With the enterprise solution. So what I'm going to do is get this scheduled for you. I'll send out the invite, and then any other additional questions or anything like that you have, please just make sure you write those down so you have that stuff, or if you can email me, I can forward that as well. Other than that, I look forward to speaking with you then. I'll get the invite out to you, and then if anything changes with your schedule, please don't hesitate to shoot that out to me as well so I can adjust that accordingly.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Bye-bye now.
And I'll just, again, press on that, like such good conversation skill and active listening. And it just goes to show, my old mentor, Tom Snyder, always would say, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And this is a perfect example of that, where the conversation skills sometimes led to him forgetting to do certain things. Like he didn't tick some of the boxes we would have liked to have had him tick, but he got away with it because the conversation skills were so good, and the prospect shared some
exactly.
He wasn't his pain because of that fact. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Let's go back over and wrap up here. What did we learn today, Seth? Well, talk us through the. If you hit that button right there. There you go. Bam.
So first thing, call scripts have their place. There's going to be a time and a place to pull that tool out of the toolbox. And maybe your organization is heavily regulated and very compliant and you need a script to get started. Maybe you're hiring a fresh batch of new recruits right out of college and you need to give them something to get started with. A script is a great place to start. But I would say every organization should really focus on call frameworks. As I mentioned earlier, a framework can replace a script, but a script can't replace a framework. Let's make sure that we're getting those battle cards created for your inside sales business development teams to really make them more effective. And then lastly, when you're thinking about scripts, this last point was one that really drove home for me many years ago in the early stages of my career, but it's all about punctuation. If you're writing a script out, be conscious of the fact that not everybody's going to know how to put that pause where a comma is. And these two read very differently without that pause in place. It's actually a a little blurb I've seen, I think since elementary school, but one says, "Let's eat, Grandma," and the other one says, "Let's eat, Grandma," right? They sound very different, and they're saying the same thing. So it's just being conscious of that when you're writing scripts out, that not everybody's going to read it verbatim the way that you think that it should be read, without a lot of training in the early stages, just to train on the script in the first place. And if you're going to do that, you might as well just do a framework.
Hearing the other people, your peers around you doing that is just such a great way, because that the way you accentuate it there makes all the difference in the world. My wife, there was some book called, Eat, Shoots, and Leaves, and it was all about pandas, and it was talking about pandas eat, shoots, and leaves, but it could be interpreted, the pandas like take a gun, they eat, they shoot, and then they leave, they walk out the door. So the punctuation and the intonation and the pausing, that's all that stuff that just doesn't show up. It doesn't show up in the numbers, but makes a tremendous difference between successful and non-successful reps. So tell us about qualified meetings, Seth.
Yeah, so qualified meetings, we help companies primarily focused in the SaaS and IT services space, but we do color outside the lines there a little bit. We help with inside sales, business development as a service. If your company's struggling with really generating top of funnel opportunities, rather it be trying to build your own team internally or trying to outsource a piece of that and really speed up the journey to value, we can help. Visit us online. You can also visit me on LinkedIn. I know that's not on the slide here, but feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. It's Seth Kinney at Qualified Meetings, and look forward to hearing from you.
All right, great. And then finally, we have the wrong link. Hit escape. Sam's fixing the slide as we're going here. But we are doing a webinar with a company called Sales Intel on Thursday, all about pre-call research, aka PCR. How can you set 70% more meetings using pre-call research? Sam is correcting the link and just sent it by way of the chat. So a very rare webinar where we don't listen to real calls. Unbelievable. I know it's possible, but it is very rare. So check out the webinar with Sales Intel on pre-call research on Thursday.
Yep, that's on Thursday.
That's on Thursday. All right, everyone, thanks so much for your time. Any comments that came in or questions that we want to go through, Sam, from this list? Or if you're thinking of anything right now, here's your opportunity to put it in the chat panel. I did see some questions about call recording laws. Happy to help there with call recording laws. It turns out there's a lot of misunderstanding on what's possible. Certain states are one-party consent states. Other states are two-party consent states. It's not where your rep is located. It's where they're calling into that matters. Federal law is one party. So basically having a call recording policy in place, we did a whole call camp just on this topic on call recording laws. So if you need help there, my email, steve@execvision.io. I will send you the information. I will not jump down your throat to try to sell you anything, but rather just simply help you to try to get compliant call recordings. It is a crusade that I'm wagering to educate legal officers and privacy officers, your GC, on what's possible now with technology, where we can do things like record only one-sided for calls placed into two-party consent states. So you don't have to ask the prospect to record the call, even though you're calling outbound to them. There's a lot of things we can do. Any other final questions or comments in here?
So there's a few awesome comments. I want to give a huge shout out to Kelly and Julia for their comments as they were coaching alongside Seth and Steve. And it's really hard to interrupt them sometimes, but great job there, ladies. That was awesome. And Julia added in, never leave your prospect with an out with any of your statements. Make sure that you're asking very directly, who needs to be on this call, not who else should be on this call.
Good comment.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And Seth, what a great topic. Well done. Maybe at some point we can trouble you to pen a blog article for us as well, because I think it's something that the community really needs to understand about and know about and learn about. And anybody who's listening now, maybe Julia or Kelly, if you want to jump in here, we'd love to feature you as well on said blog article. We are very much here to contribute to the community and what everyone's thinking about. And this topic is just a slam dunk. We all care about it. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for your time. Happy selling.
Have a great day.